It's alive.
Well, I mean, I'm still looking at the thumbnail, and I have to say I was very happy with myself with how our thumbnail image came out. I was like, your books look perfect the way they just go on screen.
Yeah.
Your book covers were meant to be shared.
Yeah, they're good covers.
And yeah, we're officially live.
Yay. Hello, everyone.
Hi. Hopefully people will start joining in and the links will be sent and everyone on Twitter will know. Because there's always that little 7-second delay where you're not really sure what's going on.
Right. That sounds like my life, actually. 7-second delay where you don't know what's going on. Explains a lot of things.
Well, it was so funny the other day. I said, I'm like, oh, I only had 2 cups of coffee today. And the person's like, only 2 cups? It's like, I need at least 4 to function on just a regular level.
I've cut to 2, but I used to drink a lot more. But when you get older, Tommy doesn't like acid things that much. So.
Oh, hi, Caroline. Oh, and Lady Gizmo. Oh, thank you guys for joining us. You guys are so sweet. Welcome. I know, I'm so excited. I get to talk to the fabulous Victoria Gilbert, whom I'm absolutely adore. Y'all, I mean, I'm so happy I get to like consistently keep talking to you. I'm so honored that I get to spend my time with you because we've done a couple interviews now and she's so talented and I get to shine a spotlight on this incredible writer. So I hope you all enjoyed tonight's conversation and start reading her books.
Yes, the books. Yes, hello everyone. Excuse me for being a little faded out. I don't have the ready for prime time setup for the camera here. But happy to be able to join in tonight.
Well, I still translate it over on YouTube, so even if you have, I mean, we just go with it at this point. Oh yes! Oh, you got it on your phone. That's so cool. So you're just watching live stream. I actually don't. I've never thought about like someone sitting there with their phone watching the conversation. I love that. Go Caroline. Oh, Jess, welcome. The fabulous Victoria Gilbert is here. I know. I was kind of thinking tonight, if you guys had questions about writing cozy mysteries, because NaNoWriMo is right around the corner, and this fabulous woman over here is so prolific. I'm sure advice when it comes to writing for that 1 month, 50,000 words. So, I mean, you guys want to just talk about like writing your cozies with Victoria Gilbert for a little bit? My first question to you to just kind of like kick off this conversation is, you know, what makes a cozy mystery for you?
For me?
Yeah, what is a cozy mystery to you?
Well, I sort of blend cozy and traditional mysteries, I guess. I think they're very similar. I mean, people use those terms for different things, but actually I think they're pretty much the same thing. But to me, it's you really ought to have an amateur detective, even if you have others in this book. Now I have a sheriff's deputy who's a major character, and there's other law enforcement people in the story, but the protagonist is usually an amateur detective. And there's no graphic sex or violence, which suits me fine because I don't want to write it. And there's, you don't have a lot of gore from the murder. It's not a shock. You're not going for a shock factor like you would with some more hard-boiled type of crime novels or horror or anything like that. And usually it's in a small town, although it doesn't have to be. I've seen read some really great cozies that are set in cities. But when they're in a city, normally there's a neighborhood of some kind. There's a group of people that form the core characters. So that doesn't have to be a small town. That could be, a neighborhood in a city. But I think that something people look for is when they start reading the series, it's not just the protagonist or their love interest or whatever. It's all those people that are part of their neighborhood, part of their family, their friends, maybe their enemies. I don't know. But a group that just kind of, you become like family, or you get to know them across the books.
So hard. Like that's why people love Hallmark.
Yeah, I mean, you start to really feel like you really know these people, especially after several books, I think. And that's a real draw. I think people are looking for that connection. You know, I hadn't really thought about it until this very second, but one of the things in a lot of crime novels, which I love, by the way, I love hard-boiled stuff too, or psychological drama and that sort of thing. But a lot of times the characters in that are very disconnected. They're very apart from, say, the society. There might be loners. And in a cozy or a traditional mystery, you tend to have more of connections, and they're not on their own totally in the story.
I think maybe my voice just came back at me and startled me. It's weird to hear yourself just come at you.
Yeah, it's doing that echoey thing slightly, I think, unfortunately.
No, you just reminded me of an Agatha Christie where the detective comes in and they're separated from the case. They come in with that kind of cold lens, whereas if it's a small town, you know the person, or you know the killer, or you know the victim.
Right.
Personal
Yeah. Yeah, and that's slightly different. I mean, the Christie tended to have, you know, Poirot would come in. He had a lot of facts, but he didn't necessarily know all those people personally. So it's a little different style than when you're trying to get to the root of the problem, because you're not drawing on your friends and family to help you tell you about that old neighbor down the street or whatever. And in my books, well, the first series, writing 2 series now.
It's amazing.
The first series is the Blue Ridge series, which there's 3 books out now. The 4th book comes out in January, so that one's done. I mean, you know, I'm done with it basically. And that's January 7th. Yes, that's called Bound for Murder, and that one is coming out from Crooked Lane Books. And then Crooked Lane, I'm doing another series for them called the Book Lovers B&B series, and that series is set in Beaufort, North Carolina. I make North Carolina because there's 2 Beauforts. One's in North Carolina and one's in South Carolina, and they're both near the ocean. So you have to be clear about that. But Beaufort, North Carolina is this beautiful little town. It's near Atlantic Beach, and it isn't right on the ocean. It's but a waterfront town that has a harbor, and it's very old. And I love bringing history into my books, so that lent itself. And also, I wanted to write about a place I knew, and although I haven't lived there, we have a timeshare at Atlantic Beach, and we go every year for a week, and we spend a lot of time in Beaufort. So I had the ability to really walk the streets and really, you know, take pictures, get the essence of the sense of being there, which I think is really important. And I have those. I also have some scenes at Atlantic Beach and Fort Macon, which is near Atlantic Beach. So, you know, drawing on that, I like to have that where I can really feel like I know what I'm talking about. So that book is called Booked for Death, and it's set at a B&B in Beaufort, a fictional one, although there's a bunch of real B&Bs in Beaufort. And it's coming out in June of 2020.
Wow. I was just writing down my question. Am I echoing? I was writing down my question because you said you took pictures while you were walking the streets. Like, what did you do with the pictures? Did you print them out and post them on your wall?
You know, I have them on my computer, and I just, you know, I look at them and I study them. And also, I got a wonderful opportunity. I got to talk to the chief of police there, who was this wonderful person who I'm going to thank in my book, because they have this, you know, small police station, and I walked up and I thought, well, I could just get an idea of what the station looked like and so forth. But I walk in, and the receptionist, I said, you know, I just wanted to know, I had a question about how the police would respond to a murder in that town.
I love how you're doing your research.
And she was so nice. She says, oh, well, the police chief's here, so let me ask him if he wants to talk to you. I'm like, okay. So we went and sat down in the conference room and talked to him. He was great. He was fantastic. I got a lot of good information.
I stumbled into this great interview.
So, I mean, it was just so nice because I got a better sense of what would really happen there. And so in the book, I'm very complimentary to the Beaufort Police Department.
That's amazing. I have this, I'm picturing this, like you're walking in and they're just like, yeah, we'll explain the process. Like, we took you under their wing. That's so cool.
Yeah. And, I personally don't like to run down, like in my books, I don't show the police or the sheriff's departments being incompetent because I really don't like that. I mean, there are always maybe a person who isn't that great, but I don't like to denigrate law enforcement. So I try to show them being pretty competent most of the time.
I mean, I appreciate it as a reader because, again, like if you're living in a small town, you really don't want to think your police force is totally incompetent.
Well, the funny thing is they hadn't had a murder in 30 years until just recently. And that was some domestic thing. I don't know. But it was funny because I said, well, now you're going to have a bunch more because I have this series. So
like knock on wood. You can write the murders.
But I mean, fake murders, not real murders. But,
yeah. I love that you were able to talk to them one-on-one. I mean, because again, you're gonna be able to add details that, Google, right. You can't do that. You can't just, go on Google Hangouts and be like, what does the Google map say?
Right. He told me a really funny thing too, that I didn't use in the book, but I might use in the acknowledgments, but it said, do you know what chaos means? And I said, no. And he said, it means chief has arrived on scene. So he was making a joke at his own expense. That was really funny.
I mean, that's so cute. Yeah. Is he kind of the inspiration for the character in a way? Maybe?
No, I had actually used a female detective, and but I was able to ask him too, like, how many detectives would you have, and would you call in the state police? And I mean, things like that are really helpful.
I mean, I also think it's nice that you, again, the police aren't the totally incompetent ones, because it's also your characters kind of, they're not overstepping with the police lines. There's none of that, oh, we're going to arrest you for interference and because we're not doing our jobs. Like, you balance that quite well.
Oh, thank you. But I try to do that. I mean, in the Blue Ridge series, of course, Amy being a librarian, she gets called on to do research, which brings her in more naturally, I think. The other case, the innkeeper, the lady who runs the B&B, is the main character. And because it's her B&B where this murder happens, that's why she's involved, and she's suspected along with other people. So that brings her into it.
She's
a little bit, the reader isn't going to think so, but yeah.
Well, no, that's always a great reason to become a sleuth. I mean, my biggest pet peeve when it comes to mysteries in general is when you have that person kind of like looking over the fence into their neighbor's yard.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to investigate and go above and beyond, and you have to have a clear motivation for this. You can't just be a nosy little town gossip. I'm sorry. No.
Yeah. And in this one, there's also a mystery, a historical mystery as well, tied to her. She inherited the inn from her great aunt. And there's a mystery involving her great aunt, which was fun. And it's a little different. It brings in something a little different. And it leads into, I always like to have a couple different threads, not just like, well, here's one murder and that's all we're going to talk about all book long.
Here's your one narrative that we all follow.
Because to me, it's boring to me. So if I'm bored, then the reader's going to be bored. So I have to write stuff that interests me, because otherwise it's just not going to work. And I would say that's a writing tip. You want a writing tip. If you're bored, trust me, the reader will be bored. And so you always get to that point. I mean, I get to a point where I'm like, I'm bored with this. And then I realize I have to change something. I have to do something different. I have to find another hook or something to make it more interesting, because if it's, the pacing will just drop off or whatever if if you're not feeling it, or you're not feeling like, there's anything interesting going on.
As the echo comes back again, like we just really want to reaffirm that I love her books. That's why it's got echo. Gotta have the reinforcement. But because I love that you balance. I think this is hinting to this beautifully. You have the balance of the love story. I mean, Richard, my book boyfriend. I love the leading man. I love him so much. I adore this guy. I don't know if that's coming across or not, but I love him. So you have the romantic elements, then you have the element of just the again, you have kind of a historical mystery of, oh, this happened previously. Then you have the current mystery murder going. So I mean, you have a lot of different threads for readers. I mean, I love all the threads, but it's almost like, oh, if you're more interested in romance, like we have romance for you. And if you're more interested in like a historical mystery, we have that for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I truly love history. I've always loved history. I had an art history minor in college. And my son is a big history buff. It's always been something that's fascinated me, and I also find it interesting how things carry down through time and how they can affect the present, and that's always been interesting to me to read in books. And so, I add that in because they are contemporary, they're set present day, but that way I can bring in some essence of, well, in the first book it was the 1920s. And then different types of Bound for Murder, which is the fourth book, is actually about the hippie generation in the 60s. So, I mean, there's that element, that's the historical element in that one.
And if you
Question?
Yeah. No, like if anyone has questions, like please type them. I mean, I agree. Chief has arrived on scene is adorable. And I'm pretty sure Jess is agreeing with you, talking about the police being competent. Yeah. That one. No, I mean, if you guys have questions, please pick her brain because it is a brilliant brain. Who has a question? Does your son critique or offer his historical knowledge for you?
He doesn't critique because he won't read my books because he finds that embarrassing or something. I don't know. He's 24. But he does. I mean, he knows a lot about history, so I do sometimes ask him, is this right? He's really a history buff. My husband reads my drafts, and he's very helpful with just sort of general things or, catching weird stuff. And then, of course, my wonderful agent, Fran Black, she always reads my drafts before, and she gives me advice too. So, I don't really have beta readers right now. I mean, I have some critique partners who help me with things, but I have to write so fast. That's something I found. I mean, in the past, I did have beta readers when I first started out. And now that I have these contracts where I have to basically write a book every 5 months, there's no beta reader in the world that can keep up with that because, I'm writing. And for me to send it out and get it back in time, it just doesn't work.
So how do you balance? I mean, how does that process work for you, like taking into account with your husband, reading for grammar or Fran? I mean, how does this process work for you? Do they read things in parts? Do they read it in whole? I mean, what is this editing process like?
With Crooked Lane, they have a really great editing team, which is nice. My main editor, who's a developmental editor and acquiring editor who actually acquired my books for Crooked Lane, is Faith Black Ross. And she's wonderful with, I send her the manuscript and then she'll send it back with all kinds of notes about more bigger picture things, or, maybe you could add something here, add this thread, or maybe we need, and some of it can be quite extensive, changes, but they're always helpful. I might look at it and go, but when I first look at the notes, but the minute I start sitting down and really digging into it and working on it, she's always right. So what can I say? In fact, I've told this story before, but she was the one who suggested that I add a character with the first book in the Blue Ridge series because she thought we needed another red herring character, another character who could have been a suspect. And she didn't tell me who or what or anything. She just, and I was very daunted because I was like, oh, got to weave this person in. They're supposed to be fairly significant. And it turned out to be one of my favorite characters, which is Kurt. So I was very happy that actually that happened because, he got added and he's been very important in the whole series. So I take her advice. And not to say that she would force me into something, which editors don't. I think sometimes people have this idea that editors are going to like change your work. They don't. They wouldn't have picked your book if they didn't like your voice. If they didn't like the way that you wrote, why would they have acquired your book? So what they're trying to do is help you. And I think people just really need to know that and be flexible and say, well, let me experiment a little bit and see if I can do what they want. And there's been a couple times when after Faith works with it and I revise, it goes back, and then she approves it. It goes to copy editors, and that's more of the grammar, although they do catch inconsistencies too, or any kind of continuity errors as well. And then proofers. So there's several different things, and it always comes back to me to look over again. It's a give and take. It's not like, well, here it is, and we're going to change it, and you're not going to see it. That never happens.
I love the way I was like, please don't echo. I'm only echoing. You're perfect. I love when you say though, like they love your voice. They picked you up. I mean, it sounds more inspiring and positive, and the way you frame that was just, oh, I love that. You're taking my little reading and writing heart over here.
I mean, they're not your enemy. It's like I see this sometimes with people, being afraid. Usually it's people who haven't not necessarily yet worked with a good editor, but they're afraid somebody's going to really change their work or, kill their voice or something like that. And it's just not the way it works, at least not with good people. It's a team effort to try to improve the book, and they don't want to see it fail. So they're not trying to sabotage you. And I can say, no, I don't want to change that. And they, okay, they're just pointing out this would be better if you did it this way, or maybe this would read better, or this is confusing or something. And it's great because you really can't see all those things. And sometimes they point out things that I'm going, oh my goodness, like,
oh my goodness.
Well, like you've had a character who was across the room and all of a sudden they're sitting on a chair and you're like, oh yeah, well, just things that where you've been writing and you didn't really see it. You didn't see that they couldn't be doing that. They were over there, and they can't be hugging someone here because they're way over there. So, or, you forget that somebody drove somewhere in a car together and then you have them driving off into separate cars or something. I mean, you need your editors for those things.
I think there was a series one time where the character was pregnant for probably close to 2 years, and I was it was a different pregnancy, but it was the same pregnancy for 2 years.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Time is really tricky. I actually, I've now gotten to the point where I print out calendars and for my books to mark which chapter is what day in a hypothetical, year, because it's really easy to get mixed up about, something couldn't have happened that fast, or, or it went too long, or it was like, well, like you're saying, a pregnancy that goes on for 2 years. So it helps to just plot that out. Every chapter is like, right, it's Friday evening, and the next day, next chapter.
I noticed the pregnancies because I remember they talked about the fashion with the baby bump, and then it was winter again, and they were talking about fashion. I was going, wait a second, hold up.
Yeah.
Like, this is not how pregnancy works.
Yeah, my books tend to happen over a short period of time. I think with mysteries that happens a lot because the events are transpiring. It's not like a fantasy book where you can have a quest that goes on for years. In this, I usually, it's no more than a couple months at the most. that it's spanning in time. Sometimes even less time than that.
So at least on your calendar, you don't have hundreds and hundreds of days that you have to mark off and account for then.
No, it's like, well, this is happening in this season, so it's, April to May, June, whatever. And that's the other thing, I try to pick seasons and what's happened in the book before. So if one's in one season and you figure, well, this is supposed to be 3 months later, let's make it the right season. It was summer and now it's summer again and it's 3 months later or whatever. So, yeah. So, I do plot out. I mean, with mysteries, I've said this before, but I couldn't pants a mystery. It's just not. I think the revision process would be so horrendous. I don't, force myself to stick to an outline so rigidly that nothing can ever change. But it helps if you've outlined it to the point where you know the sequence of events and when you have to put the clues in and when you have to mention certain things, because that's one of the really tricky parts, is bringing in. And that's another thing the editors will help you with. Like my editor will say, well, you might have mentioned that before, but it wasn't really clear, so you need to beef that up back there in that other chapter so that this makes sense now. So things like that.
Because again, you write really quickly. It is impressive. I kind of feel as if NaNoWriMo is your life in a way.
Yeah, that's why I don't do NaNoWriMo actually. I've written that much in a month, though. I mean, I have written that much in a month, but I've never done it officially.
Unofficially succeeded on multiple occasions.
Yeah. I worked out a schedule of writing, though. I know how much I have to write a week to reach the specific deadline goal. And I procrastinate just like everybody else. And then I'm panicking at the end, just like everybody else. But I kind of know now how much I can feasibly write in a day. And, I didn't when I began writing. So that's something I've learned, is how much I can expect that I could actually get done.
How many books did it take you to learn your kind of writing style or quirks then?
Pardon?
How many
books? Probably 2 or 3, really.
Okay.
And I wrote other books before I wrote the mysteries, so that I'm including those in it.
Oh no! I mean, again, she's prolific, people. Like, you were across genres. It is impressive.
Yeah, actually, I'm working on something now that's a slightly different genre too. That's the second book I'm working on right now. I do love suspense, and so I had an idea and I floated it to my agent, and she really liked it. She said, well, why don't you write a few pages or write a synopsis, see what comes out. And so of course I got obsessed and I wrote a synopsis and a pitch and 30 pages. And then she said, well, this is great. Can you write some more pages and then we're going to shop it around? So, because I'm actually at the point now where she can, because I have written several books and have contracts ongoing and all those things, that instead of having to write the entire book, we can shop things on proposal is what they call it. And so actually she's going to be doing that in early November or a little before, so we'll see what happens. But this is a suspense novel, and it's actually based on well, not based on my life, but it has some connection to my childhood, and I've always wanted to do it, but I wasn't quite ready to do it, and so now I'm working on it. It's called Clearance, and it deals with biological warfare. But my father was a virologist. He worked for the government. Yeah, this is different than the cozy. It's not going to be really graphic, though. I don't really want to write graphic. It's just more hard edge subject. And you know, I grew up. My father was the top security clearance person. He had level whatever security clearance, and so when I was a kid, I grew up with this life that I don't think people really understand. I mean, it wasn't like he was bringing it home, but there were aspects like I couldn't go to his work. You couldn't take daughter to work day. You couldn't talk about it except to say, well, he is a virologist. Mm-hmm. And you know, he couldn't talk to us. He couldn't tell my mother. He couldn't tell anybody what he really did. And that kind of thing is, you just get used to it. And then when I got older, I realized how different it was to not know those things and to not have that. That's the secrets that you have. And there were other things like the FBI used to come visit our neighbors and make sure that my dad wasn't up to anything.
I mean, I was in DC, so every time someone says something, oh, I work in security, or oh, I work in like some people will be vague on purpose. So I'm kind of, it was something I had to get used to. So I can kind of see how this become a thing. I mean, now you got me thinking of, oh, did you do, you know, bring your father to school and talk about your profession? Like he couldn't do that.
No. And we couldn't visit, like I said, we couldn't visit his work. I mean, you couldn't, it's a level 4 biosecurity lab, so you're not getting in there. And then he went to work for private corporations later, but I mean, he was still working at really high level research. We weren't, you know, it's just that whole, you know, people say, well, people can't keep secrets. I mean, oh, if there was a conspiracy, couldn't be a conspiracy because nobody can keep that kind of secret. And I said, yes, they can. Yes, they can. My dad kept those secrets till he died. I mean, he hadn't worked for the government for like 20 years or so more, but he would never have divulged it, even after it. And, you know, there's a lot of people who have that kind of.
Yeah, I guess comment just up. As a military wife who understands, and then she's wishing me the best of luck with this new book. I'm like, I know you're 30 pages in, but I need this book now.
I'm 92 pages in because I wrote more, 92 pages in. So, yeah. And I actually have a YouTube channel that is just my book trailers, by the way. So if you look up Victoria Gilbert author, you'll find my book trailers. And I did one for Clarence, so you can see a little bit more about that there.
I have to go look that up. I know I'm subscribed to your channel, but I don't always get the YouTube notifications. So
yeah. I just put it up today, so you wouldn't have seen it.
Okay, I won't feel as guilty now that I missed out on the premiere.
No. But anyway, I'm that's on the side. That's not a contracted book. So of course I have to work on my contracted books. But I like to experiment. I don't like to put all my eggs in one basket, I guess.
Well, Lady has a question up above for you. How long have you been writing, and how long have you been writing cozy mysteries? Because again, you didn't start out writing cozies. You've been writing across the board.
I've written all my life in the terms of the way we all do sometimes. I always like to write stories. I wrote little stories, and I wrote a lot of poetry when I was younger. But life kind of got in the way, and I just, you know, I wrote for papers, I wrote things like that. But I never completed a book until I was, let me think now, 56. So my mantra is it's never too late, because I was quite older by the time I got around to writing an actual novel. And I had always read, I was a librarian. I read all my life, so I've read so much. And people say, well, did you take writing classes? I said, no, I took reading. I read so many books. I learned from the great writers. That's what I say. You know, I mean, there's nothing against taking writing classes, but I didn't. But I think reading so much trained me to a certain extent. And that first book I wrote didn't really go anywhere, which most first books don't. And I wrote a sequel to it, of course, because I didn't know any better. And that was good training, though. It was sci-fi. I might go back to it someday and revise it entirely, but we'll see. And then I wrote a book called Crown of Ice. I wrote it under my real name. And although it's out now under Victoria Gilbert, if you look for it, I moved everything over to Victoria Gilbert, so it'd be easier just to promote whatever. And that book actually got me an agent and a book deal with a small press. And I wrote another a young adult sci-fi that got published by that press. And I had written the sequel to the first book, to Crown of Ice. But then I ended up pulling out of that publishing group for reasons I won't go into. And I got my rights back. And so I self-published those books, Crown of Ice and Scepter of Fire. The sci-fi is not out right now. I'd have to revise it, and I don't have time. But basically, I'd written all those, and I did not write a cozy until, let's see, 2016. Yeah, because that's when I got my rights back, and I was kind of at a loss. I didn't know what I was going to do. And my wonderful agent, my second agent, Fran, who I'm with now, suggested that I write something different. And I said, well, I don't know what. And she said, well, what do you like to read? And I said, I like to read lots of things, but mysteries. And she said, well, write a mystery. So that's how that happened. So I wrote.
I always thought it was your original.
Pardon?
I always thought it was your original. I'm like, I didn't know Fran was your second agent.
Yes. The first agent worked for Fran, and she represented me with the young adult fantasy and sci-fi. But then she left the business, and Fran wonderfully stepped in and said, well, I'll keep you on. And it's been great because she really knows her business, and she's very supportive. And she was the one who thought, because she'd read my stuff, that I could write cozies and I could write mysteries. So she encouraged me to do that. And the thing is, you know, I was used to, you know, we would send things out for submission on the young adult stuff and whatever, and it would take forever and blah, blah, blah. And so I wrote the first cozy, A Murder for the Books, and Fran sent it out. And in the very day she sent it out, we got requests for fulls from publishers. So I went, I guess you're right about this. This seems to be more what I'm good at. So
I'm like, I'm glad you adopted you.
Yeah. So then, you know, I got to deal with Crooked Lane, and it was 3 books, and then they added 2 more, and then we have the new series. So, you know, I don't know how many there will be eventually. I know there'll be 5 for sure in Blue Ridge, and 2 for sure in the other one, and then they see how things go, you know.
April, hi. You are a nonfiction history writer, and your first small publisher wanted to keep all your rights, and you quickly got out of that once you realized what was happening. Ooh, yeah. So you got your rights back. So
Yeah.
That's got to be.
Yeah, I got it. I got my rights back. Well, Fran helped with that, of course. She was my agent at that point, and the publisher, you know, they were okay about it. So, you know, the problem is, once a book's been published, and this is something that I will say to people who are trying to write and get published, I'm not against self-publishing at all. I think it's great in some cases. But just be aware that if you publish a book in any form, whether it's with a small press or you self-publish it, that's it. if you decide later, oh, I want to go with, a traditional publisher, 9 times out of 10, they will not even look at it because it's already been published. Even the first book, like, they won't pick up the series or whatever. Now, the only time that is different is if you've sold, 5 million copies or something. And very few people do that. So it's like, I think with self-publishing, you have to decide that that's what you want to do. It's not a fallback. And again, I am not opposed to it. I think there's some great self-published books. People do wonderfully with it, but you shouldn't choose it because it's a fallback position. That's just all I'm saying.
How do you feel about self-published cozy mysteries in particular, or self-published mysteries? Because I'm kind of curious. Is that harder to see mysteries with self-publishing? Are they harder to get across to readers, or people?
Cozies. There's a lot of really successful cozy series that are self-published. People have done really well with them. I think it's harder maybe for the suspense, thriller, so, psychological suspense type books, although I've seen plenty of those out there too. Cozies, I think it's easier to market because you usually have a long, series, and it's a niche that you can really dive into. So it's a little bit easier. But again, I mean, personally, I don't want to self-publish. Like I said, I did to get the books out there because I wanted them out. And I did it with a co-op. I have an author co-op that I'm part of. So even though it involved basically doing self-publishing, you get a little help with promotion and things like that and support. But personally, it's just not what I want to do. I admire people who do it well because I didn't do it so well. Well, I mean, my books look great. I got great covers and all the formatting, and they're very professional, edited, but I am not a good marketer, and you have to be a really good marketer to make it in self-publishing. And I can do it to the level that's required of me with a traditional publisher, like, being great things like this, doing podcasts and my blog or my website, or, Twitter and all those things, Facebook. But not to the level of, you with self-publishing, you really almost have to be like a salesperson, a marketer extraordinaire, and that's not me. So I have a hard time with that.
Gizmo wants to ask, do you have any say on your book covers? Do you have any say as to what goes on your covers? Do you speak with the illustrator to provide input?
I don't speak with the illustrator. I speak with someone from Crooked Lane who is coordinating the cover. Yes, I am an agent, have a little bit of input. They'll send us mock-ups and say, what do you think? Or they'll ask me before they even have them doing any kind of drawing, give us some things that would be great to have on the cover, what do you want to highlight? However, the final word is theirs. And honestly, they actually, they know what they're doing. So that's fine. Also with titles, people don't understand that, they'll agonize over a title and then it gets changed. I think of all the authors I know who I've started out with, or, I knew starting out, and they had their manuscripts, and most of them had the titles changed when it came to the actual book being published. So it's just a thing. I mean, publishers a lot of times really do know that marketing a lot better than the authors do.
I was like, cover behind you.
Yes, that's Murder for the Books. Yeah. And I love my covers. They have wonderful covers at Crooked Lane.
We have a follow-up question. Does the coordinator design the cover?
No, they have professional designers that do that. So what the coordinator is an editor or somebody at Crooked Lane who takes the input and then sends it back and forth to me and my agent to get our input. But there's a designer, an illustrator, who's a professional graphic artist, does that work.
I think they're stunning. They're actually like on display over my other bookcase, which is why I can't hold them up to you right now, is because there's flowers and everything with them. So I will take a picture and post that on Instagram later.
Yeah, and you know, like for Book for Death, the cover is up, by the way, on Amazon and everything, Barnes and Noble, wherever. I said, well, I want something that gives the idea that it's seaside in the old house, because the building is a very old building in the story, and they did a great job with that. That was really nice. They have some water in the background with boats, which is, you know, gives that feel, that sense of, yeah. So
April loves your covers, and cozy covers are beautiful pieces of art.
yeah, a lot of them are. Yeah.
They're
And
so
of course, there's animals on them usually.
they're so colorful, and I mean, they're just so eye-catching, and they make you smile with the puns.
Yeah, I don't go for the punny titles. I guess I'm just too stick in the mud or something. But my books really do veer toward the traditional mystery rather than super cozy. I don't know how many people have read them. I mean, I know Angela has, of course, but they're a little bit edgy. They're a little bit edgy for cozies. I mean, not extreme. But you know, some cozies are much more comic, which is fine. Or fluffy, I would say, you know, more.
Yeah. No, I actually think your book, when it's published, it's a trade. It's not the mass market kind of formatting when you hold it up, because mine is on display. So I think that also kind of gives you a little bit of a separate vibe when you go to pick it up, because it doesn't look like the typical, you know, smaller way.
They do hardback and ebook to start. Now they were doing these trade paperbacks at Crooked Lane, but they found those weren't selling that well, and they're experimenting with mass market actually. I don't know if they'll go to mass market with everybody, but they do a lot of work with libraries and bookstores. So the hardback is the thing that is, you know, more popular there. But you know, I just I don't like to limit myself, and I think that's another, you know, I'm trying to give out when people are talking about writing. One of the things I always tell people, first of all, it's never too late, because I was older, a lot older when I got my first book published, and I was 60. Let's see, 61 when my cozy was published, so that was really the start of a real career. And I don't feel like, you know, this is the end of a career or anything. So I'm going to keep writing until I can't write anymore. But also, I tell people too to experiment. I think people get stuck in a rut sometimes. One of the things I learned in acting, I'm going to go back to, I have a theater degree. I wasn't an actress per se, but I was trained in acting. I was a costume designer professionally, but one of the things that I learned though was that what you assume about yourself or what you think you can do well isn't always the thing you do the best. Because a lot of times when we're doing scene work, a character that I would have never have expected that I could play or was not be typecast for at all, I did better acting wise with that. And I've seen that with other people. So I like to correlate that to writing, in that sometimes we think, well, you know, I really, 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 really want to write a fantasy. You know, I love adult fantasy or whatever it is. Or I really want to write a cozy mystery or whatever it is. And people will try, write, and maybe they're not getting anywhere with that genre. And they think, well, it's me, I'm a terrible writer or blah, blah, blah. And it may just be that your style, your voice does not suit that genre as well as something else. So I always advise people to experiment. If you get stuck.
I'm like, tell me more. This is so intriguing.
I mean, if I never thought about writing mysteries. I love mysteries. I love reading them, but I didn't ever think I would write them. And when Fran suggested I write one, I thought, well, I'll experiment, I'll try, I'll see what happens. And as I discovered that apparently my writing voice, my style, the way that I do create characters, whatever it is, clicks a lot better in that genre, in the mystery genre in general, than it did in other genres. So it doesn't mean that my writing in the other genres was poor. It means for the market, for what people are looking for, my voice, my writing style was not a fit. And, you can't fight that. It just is what it is. And whether you agree with it or not,
I'm so glad you finally put out. Like, because I love your voice and I love your voice. I'm like, I'm so glad you found that.
But that's why I say experiment, because you don't know. There are people who, have written really serious stuff all the time, and then all of a sudden they write a comic thing and they discover I'm good at this, or vice versa. Or they think, well, I can't write romance, and then they do. It's worth playing around with new styles, especially if you found yourself, you've been writing a long time, or you've been querying a long time, or you keep hitting walls and you feel like nobody's paying any attention to your work. Maybe it's time to try something different. That's kind of my advice.
You're so encouraging. You can do it no matter. You can always write. Like, never say your age is an issue. Never say a genre is an issue. You're the most encouraging. You're like, you can do it. You will find your spot. You will.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of discouragement out there. And you get rejected plenty of times, and you'll get rejected after you're published. I mean, you'll get 1-star reviews, you'll get people who hate your books, trade publications that hate your books. And it can be really discouraging, but I don't know. I mean, for me, it's more about, do I feel like this is what I want to say, this is how I want to say it, and have I found a place where I can do that successfully? Because nobody, not even J.K. Rowling doesn't have haters or whatever.
I mean, she was rejected 12 or 13 times. I mean, who rejected Harry Potter?
Yeah, but it was different. And it didn't really take off. I remember Harry Potter coming out. It was not the huge thing that it became. And it was good, but it was when people started really, readers got into it, that it became huge. I don't think there was that huge of a push, not like sometimes where you see these really hyped books, I don't remember that being hyped that way. Which is another thing. I mean, slow and steady sometimes wins the race. If you really, one of the things that I would rather do what I'm doing, which is, I feel like I started out, smaller, and now with Crooked Lane, it's a good mid-list. I mean, it's good. Not famous, nobody knows who I am, and all that stuff. But, well, you do, but which is good. But I mean, it's not that instant fame. Like, some people get these huge deals from the very beginning, and they may deserve them. I'm not saying they don't deserve them, but it's very, very difficult to live up to that. Very difficult. I mean, I see a lot of people who got, a huge book deal and were hyped to the skies, And I would feel very uncomfortable because then your next book has to live up to it, or the reviews have to live up to it, or I mean, it's not a piece of cake just because you get that. Um, and so, not they're still having to work really hard to keep up. It's like a singer. I like compare it to a lot of times when you see these people, they have one-hit wonders, or somebody who has success in something for a little while. It's really hard. They're still having to fight hard. There's nobody out there, not even the biggest stars in the world, in say the movies and stuff, who doesn't still have to, keep fighting. Um, and I think we over glamorize some of that, like, oh, if I could just make it to here, then I won't, I'll be made. And it's never, no, that's never going to happen. And it's good to realize that, and realize that, you just have to keep working. And the other thing that's interesting to me is that you don't always know, like if you write 50 books over your lifetime or whatever, 20, 30, 50, 40, 50, there's not a way for you to say, you might say, I love this book the best that I wrote. You don't know which one is going to be the one that's really going to be revered the most or respected the most, because that's not on you. The author doesn't get to decide that. And once I realized that, it kind of, okay, just let me put my work out there, let other people decide. So you kind of have to distance yourself from that.
Lady Wisdom loves your positivity. Your positivity is refreshing, with a little thumbs up emoji. And I saw Until Midnight popped up. I love you. I love her. I'm like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say her name. I'm like, Until Midnight. I was like, yeah, the best.
Yes.
No, I mean, you're so encouraging though. You have such a positive perspective on this. I mean, it's almost because you're kind of alluding to like the mental hurdles of writing, because because then there's the pressure of the reviews, there's this, there's that, because it's not just about the writing.
No, a lot of it's not about the writing. Sadly, it's not. And you can't make people like. It's just like when we finally learn. Well, see, I'm older, so I've been through all this stuff. When we finally learn that we can't make people love us, no matter what we do. All the stories that we read where the girl tried so hard and finally the guy fell in love with her and all that. Well, that does, that doesn't work, right? So it's the same thing with readers. You have to write a truth and be honest and do your best work that you can. But then it's in their hands. You can't make them like you. You can't make them like your books. You can't convince them. So it's kind of freeing in a way when you realize that. It's like, well, I've put it out there, and people can take from it what they want.
You're not write the books you want to read.
Yeah, and I do include things that are important to me. I try to include diversity in the characters, including gender, and I have gay characters. But I don't make a big deal out of it because, it's not a big deal. And I try to write with respect too for people. I don't like to write mean girls. I won't do that. I hate that trope. I hate that thing where the main character, female, is she's the great one and everybody else is some, biatch or something. That's not been my experience in life. Women are friends, and I like seeing female friendships. I like seeing friendships between men and women. I like seeing all those things that happen in life that are, not just cut and dried. Well, there's only this kind of relationship or this kind of relationship, and that's all there is. Because I think, if anybody's read the books, the relationship that Amy has with Kurt is an interesting one.
And Sunny.
Yeah, and Sunny, yeah. And Sunny, they're really good friends. And
I love Sunny.
Sunny, you know, she's a free spirit. She's like a different type of person, and that's fine. And I don't want to. I know some people said that you said you love Richard, which I do too, but there were several reviews that thought he was weird. And I asked a friend of mine, a guy friend, and my husband, and I said to both of them, I said, well, why do you think that is? And they said, because for a really, I think sometimes if people view everything through sort of a lens of your, macho male versus and whatever, that he doesn't fit that mold, and so he seems strange. And I said, oh, okay.
I mean, sir, who doesn't want a very handsome dance teacher professor, and then he has the dancing in his, he has the dance floor in his home. I mean, gotta think Dancing with the Stars. I mean, kind of one of those.
Well, I like to break the stereotypes of, that male artists of any kind are always going to be gay. Now, plenty of them are, and that's fine too, and I don't have a problem with that. And but I think it's just so sort of narrow-minded to always have these stereotypes of people, because in my life I've met so many different kinds of people. I like people, to be unique, and I don't want to deal with stereotypes.
I mean, I also have a heroine with curves. I mean, this is part of the book. I mean, I love the way it's handled. I love the way it's addressed, because again, you have a dance. He's very fit, and that she's got that kind of insecurity, and the way it's handled is done. You did it beautifully.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've seen it plenty of times in life. I mean, if you really look around in life and you really look at what life is, and the people you see, and the couples and you see variety. You see everything. And sometimes in books I see too much the same. Does that make sense? It's just like I've seen these characters a million times before. I like something different. So
and if anyone has any questions, as I echo again, if anyone has any questions for the brilliant mind that is Victoria Gilbert, please type them in. Because you are so intriguing to me. I just want to hold you hostage and keep talking to you. You're so fascinating. I mean, I was looking down at them. I wrote these specifically for you.
Okay.
Either or questions, but they have to do with history tropes.
Okay.
So you have to choose your either or, like which one's more intriguing, I guess.
Okay.
Locked in a room mystery or poison mystery?
Poison.
A hidden in plain sight or where is the evidence? You can't find it.
Probably the hidden in plain sight.
The intrepid reporter or the butler did it?
I have to go with the reporter.
There is a discrepancy with the clock or there is a blood-stained letter?
I think the blood-stained letter is more interesting.
Oh, I was like, wait a second. The eureka moment or the summation?
I think more the eureka moment, because summation gets too, Agatha Christie could do that. Not everybody can do that.
The meddling kids then runs away, like they yell the meddling kids like Scooby-Doo, or or they keep yelling and they surmise their crimes to the amateur sleuth. So run away or talk out your crime.
I guess, run away makes more interest.
We have a mysterious strangler, or it's not a suicide, but murder.
Yeah, the suicide murder thing.
A mistaken identity, or using one's job for murderous purposes.
I think the mistaken identity, because it goes back to that history sort of thing, or that playing around with different characters.
And then I wanted to ask, so having an alibi or not having an alibi?
I think having an alibi is more interesting because if it's false, then it's sneakier.
I was intrigued because sometimes people fake them and at other times they just don't have them.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell. Those are my little mystery questions.
Yeah.
And then, hey, we have more questions. So you love the murder mystery as well. How do you structure your whole story and how long must it be? That's a good question. How long is a mystery story usually word count wise?
Mine are actually contractually supposed to be around 80,000 words. They vary 79 to 83,000 words. So I would say that's probably fairly standard. That comes out to printed books of like 320 pages or 3 something. That seems to be kind of a standard thing I've seen, at least in cozies. Now, some of the self-published cozies are a lot shorter than that, because they're sometimes they're doing a series where they're kind of doing cliffhangers, and then they're turning out books a lot faster. But I don't write cliffhangers with the traditional publishing. Your books are usually only going to come out every 9 months to a year in that series. Now I have more books coming out because I have different series, so they're going to start coming out every 6 months. But within the series, it's like a year, and to leave people hanging that long, I don't like that.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and I think I missed. Oh, how do I structure? Well, like I said, I outline. I know that I tend to, without trying, it's just the way it's ended up, write about chapters that are about 10 to 12 pages long. Sometimes they're a little longer, sometimes a little shorter, but that's at least in the cozies. And working that out, I end up having about 30 chapters, 30, 32, something like that, 29. It's in that range. So I know that it's going to break down that way to reach, a certain goal. And so I actually do chapter outlines. So I know, and it helps with the, we were talking a little earlier before we got online, timing and, when I do the chapter outline, I actually put in each chapter what day it is, or whether it's that day, the next day, or that evening, or, to keep up with that, because it's really hard otherwise to keep up with it.
Who are your favorite authors to read?
Oh gosh. Well, see, this is where I get in trouble because I don't read a lot of cozies. I tend to read more darker stuff, psychological stuff. I love Ruth Rendell, who also wrote as Barbara Vine. She's passed now, but I love her stuff. I like James, Pete James. Of course, Agatha Christie and all the greats, Dorothy Sayers. But one author who I think has really influenced me, and I didn't really see it at first, and now when I look at my books, I can see it, is Mary Stewart. And I used to read Mary Stewart when I was young, a lot. And she wrote a lot of romantic suspense. A lot of people know her from the Crystal Cave and the Merlin stories, which are wonderful, by the way. I love them too. But she wrote a ton of romantic suspense novels that were mysteries, basically. And they weren't cozies necessarily because they kind of took place all around the world, and it's a little different. Some of them were sort of spy versus spy kinds of stuff. But when I went back to read some of her books again, I realized that my style kind of similar. There's a similarity. She influenced me. I'll just say that. I'm not saying I'm as good as she was. I'm just saying, I can see it. And these days, I don't get to read as much as I like because I'm writing all the time. And it's really hard. That's one thing that's really hard, is hard to keep up with reading. when I have to write so much. And now I love other writers. I love and the name's going to go out of my head. Well, I love John Crowley, who writes fantasy. Well, it's a very intellectual fantasy. Okay, I know this person's name, and it's going away from me. The person who, Ann Tyler. I love Ann Tyler. But it's more style. It's not genre so much for me. It's just a style of writing or a kind of writing that appeals to me. The way they draw characters, whether it holds my interest. So.
Would you prefer cozies not to be called cozies? Is there another term you'd use for them?
I tend to use traditional mysteries for mine. Yeah, I would prefer them not to be called cozies. I think that started out as a way to define them, and it's fine. I'm not offended by it or anything, but it kind of implies something beyond what they are a lot of times, I think. I mean, yes, there's no graphic sex and violence. There's no, but when you're dealing with murder, you're dealing with murder, okay? I mean, you know, you can only make that so light, at least in my opinion. I know there's some really, really lighthearted ones, and maybe satirical, that's kind of fine too, but for me, there's a certain level of gravity to the murder that I can't quite get that flippant with it. So, you know, it affects people. And that's one thing in my book I try to show is what it does to other people, the family or the people that knew this person, or, you know, it's not a thing where nobody, you know, it's not like jewel thieves, like, you know, Cary Grant being a jewel thief or something. I mean, he's still stealing and it's not good, but it's not quite the same. I think when the real lighthearted stuff, I actually prefer more like a caper or something than dealing with murder.
I was like, April's comment is so sweet. She agrees with you. She agrees that you write more traditional mystery, and it's a breath of fresh air. Oh,
Good.
It's like high five, fellow Victoria Gilbert fans. We should
And like I said, the suspense book I'm writing is, my agent said, well, do you have any comps? You know, like, because usually when you send stuff out to publishing houses, you want to compare it to something. It's like so and so. Well, we looked and looked, and there's no comp, no current comps, because all the kind of books similar to it are either written by men, or B, or much. I have a different perspective, let's just say. And I wanted to write something that was about family, how family was affected. It's not women's lit per se, although there's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, I was thinking, well, you know, a thriller, suspense, things can happen that affect women and families. And that's a little different than the perspective of the lone male wolf kind of, you know, the lone wolf guy going out and, you know, Jason Bourne or something like that. And I don't see a lot of that. I don't see it out there. I looked. And it's not being written as far as I can tell. I don't know.
Understudy, so you're speaking to my academic side right now.
Yeah.
And, Lady Gizmo, dun dun dun. I love the way you typed that. That is hysterical. I thought so. Traditional mysteries, it is. And then April is with me, and we can't wait to read the suspense book. I was like, April, we need to put pressure on her. Like, yes, we need to get this written.
Yeah, I mean, I just think I like a women's perspective too, a female perspective. And one thing about cozies, though, that's lovely, or traditional mysteries, a lot of times, is that there is that female perspective, and a lot of times there isn't. And even if it's a female protagonist, let me clarify this because it's important to me. There's a lot of books out there with female protagonists. Some are written by men, some are written by women, and they don't feel like they're speaking from a female protagonist point of view to me. And I don't mean that women can't be as tough as men or whatever, but it seems like the woman gets turned into this sort of a masculine viewpoint. It's and it has nothing to do with gender identity or anything like that. I mean, it's a viewpoint of life, and I think that we need more female viewpoints. Um, and I'm including trans people in that too, but people who identify as female. Um, from a real sense of not something weaker, but just a different perspective, because it is very different. And I really get tired sometimes of watching films where the only way to show a woman being strong is to show her like killing people or fighting. And well, the only way to show a man being strong too is the way that they do. And I don't think that's true for either gender. I think that, strength can come in a lot of different ways. And to show strength of will, to show strength of character, as opposed to just, using your fists or whatever. That's important. And I think sometimes people can be braver and stronger without violence. It takes more bravery, takes more strength. So that's what that's what I'm talking about a different perspective of
I was
from
like,
the
from your book. I'm like, oh, I'm excited.
Yeah. And I feel like a way with Amy too. I mean, my main characters, they're pretty strong. I mean, I think they're strong. Do they have insecurities? Yes, don't we all? But they will fight for their family, but not violently. I mean, they were going to defend and protect, but they don't just resort to violence to do it. And one of the books I wrote was a fantasy. It's called Scepter of Fire, and the main character in that one is a healer. It's a fantasy that's sort of in a pseudo 1830s 40s Scandinavia, because it's based on Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales. And the main character is a healer, and she goes through lots of really tough stuff, but she doesn't kill anybody. But she's very tough. She's very tough. And to me, that kind of strength is what interests me in men or women.
You're so fascinating. So intriguing. I mean, yes. I'm like, yes to everything you just said.
That's one reason I like foreign films. I mean, I love foreign films, and I think a lot of times they present more nuanced viewpoints, whether it's male or female characters and gender, whatever. It's not just this, the guy's macho and tough and it and that's not life. Life is more nuanced than that. So, I just watched well, if anybody has not seen this yet, I'm throwing out my non sequitur here, but there's a movie. It's on Amazon Prime, but you can also get it on Blu-ray or whatever. It's called I Am Dragon. It's Russian with subtitles, and it's one of those beautiful films I've ever seen. And I guess it's a fairy tale folk sort of thing, and they do it right, and it's so different than what I've seen U.S. films try to do with fantasy. It's just amazing. And that's the thing with books too, is what fascinates me is something that teaches me something different, shows me something different, makes me feel something different. And I'm going to say something that would get me in trouble a lot of places, but it really bugs me when people just say, oh, I just read to escape. That's fine. I don't. I read to learn, but not learn intellectually. necessarily learn emotionally, experience new things. And I don't care if people read to escape. That's great, but I don't think that's the be all and end all of everything. So sometimes when I say, well, I like this book, and people say, well, it's too intellectual, or it's too tough, or it's too this, or it's too that, and I'm like, oh, well, okay. I just like to see something different. I know me. I'm not that interesting. I want to learn something different. And that's why I also don't write self-insert characters. It's like, no. I want to be somebody, I want to write about different people, not me. So I'm sure that a little bit of my character slips through, but I definitely try hard not to make self-insert characters.
And then I just saw comments pop up. I was looking up the movie. I was like, I thought I had seen it, but I don't know if I have. I don't think I have. So Until Midnight, you like the masculine perspective. I mean, yeah, each his own. Whatever makes you happy, as long as you're reading. And then Teacher April, if you haven't read Deborah Harkness, I think you would enjoy her writing. So have you read Deborah Harkness?
Oh, yeah, she did the Witches series, right? Was that the one that they made a TV show out of?
Oh, Witches Music or something?
No. There was a recent TV show, I believe, that was done.
Maybe I have that one on my mind because I just saw a thing with it. I think it was on Netflix or Amazon or something.
Yeah. I haven't read it yet, but it's on a list. It's on a list.
I know. Now I have a movie I need to go watch. We have more people that we need to read. Yes. Yes to all of it. I mean, if anyone has any other questions, now is the time to ask them. I mean, Witches of East End, All Souls trilogy. Okay.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking of. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's so many witch things. But I love paranormals. It's like, bring on.
Yeah, paranormal's interesting.
Discovery of Witches. I'm there for it. Until Midnight paranormal. Like, we have paranormal fans around here.
There's a lot of paranormal cozies, which I'm sure you're aware of.
I'm getting more into them. I mean, Halloween is the time to read some paranormal cozies.
Yeah, there's some good ones out there. I haven't, if you will notice, if you're looking carefully, you'll notice in all of my Blue Ridge books anyway, that there's a touch of possible paranormal activity in them. I like to play around with it, because I'm a skeptic and yet I have an open mind. So I like to, okay, this will explain everything. One of my favorite stories of all time is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. And the reason that I love that so much is because I can read it and I get one thing out of it, and Angela can read it, she gets another thing out of it, and we're both right. Because he was that brilliant. And if I could write that brilliantly, I would die happy. But that ability to put in front of the reader something that could be one thing or another and is valid, and let them decide what they think.
I'm adding things to my Goodreads. I'm looking down, I was like, must read book.
That you could read, and that's why I liked Ruth Rendell too, who wrote as Barbara Vine. It's very, it allows the reader to also make their own mind up about certain things. So you're not spoon-fed things, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That you can read it, and if you think there's ghosts, there's ghosts. If you don't think there's ghosts, there's a perfectly good explanation why there isn't ghosts. So that's kind of the way I add paranormal in mine, because I don't believe in ghosts, and yet I'm not going to tell you that there's none. I'm not completely convinced there isn't. My family name, one of the most haunted mansions in the U.S., belonged to some distant relative of mine. So I guess I really shouldn't. I haven't been there yet. I'm curious someday to go and see it.
You do have a question pop up.
Yeah.
How do you find an agent or publisher for short stories?
Oh, short stories are hard. Agents don't deal with short stories usually. Now, if you're their client and you're for a book and you're writing short stories, then they're going to work with you. But short stories, you really have to go directly to magazines and anthology calls and things like that. So it's more of a direct from the author to, like I said, if you're established, then I'm sure the agent, would help you with the deal. But to get an agent with short stories is almost impossible. I hate to say that because I love short stories, but it's it's just not a thing. It's a different market. I wrote a short story for an anthology for my co-op, but that was just, my agent didn't broker anything with that. She did help promote it.
I'm gonna have to say goodnight in a little bit because I have a dog looking at me, wondering why I'm still over here ignoring him. So
time to go out, Mom.
I know he's giving me that look of like he's like, I'm owed a walk. He's doing that staring. I'm a dog mom, for those who don't know. Max is my child. He's my baby.
I'm a cat mom, so I have cats.
So before I have to go take out the little guy who's staring at me, does anyone have any final thoughts, questions, queries for this beautiful mind over here of Victoria Gilbert? Because you're so much fun to chat with. I mean, I just adore you so much.
Well, thank you so much. I would just like tell everybody, if you're interested, I mean, my website really has the most information. And that's just victoriagilbertmysteries.com. Or if you just look up Victoria Gilbert, there's a few others, but you'll find it. And I try to keep that updated with all my news and events and books coming out, new deals, and all that good stuff.
And if you're following her on Twitter or Instagram, you should.
Yeah.
I follow her on every platform, I'm pretty sure.
I have a Facebook author page and all that good stuff too. But I try to keep them updated, I don't blog a lot or anything, but I do post things about deals or things that are happening.
I was like,
check out my book trails. I actually made them myself, so I'm really proud of them.
I know, now I have to watch that. I'm probably going to take a must-watch book trailer. I know I'm subscribed to your YouTube, but gotta make sure.
Yeah.
Oh, and thank you guys for watching. You guys are so sweet. Until Midnight, I love Paranormal Book Box for romance readers. Teacher April, Jess, from you. I love your title, From Me to You. I always want to just call you Jess because I know who it is, but it says From Me to You. I was like, for people who don't know, that's Jess. And then Lady Gizmo, you guys are the best. Oh, you're so sweet.
And thanks to Angela for having me on again, because this has been great.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I love chatting with you and everyone. You guys are so sweet for watching. You guys, your final comment just, you guys are the best. And you're so sweet and eloquent. I mean, I could talk to you forever. I just got a little dog over there who's looking.
And I'd also like to say, if anybody is watching, or even later on, if somebody is watching when it's posted, and you have questions about writing or publishing biz or any of that stuff, I like to help. So there's a contact page on my website. You can contact me, or on Twitter or whatever. And it's really not a bother. I don't mind answering questions or whatever. So
you're so sweet. Oh, you guys are so great. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you. A huge thank you to Victoria. Everyone should be reading your books. You are an amazing writer, and you're so sweet and so kind and so positive. I mean, everyone needs that positivity. You're a little bright light. You're so sweet. So I'm gonna go take out little Max, because if you guys don't know, he's a little 5-pound ticket Maltese who runs my world. So I'm gonna ask you. Yeah. He is in charge. Like, he runs the department. He's the king.
I do.
Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for joining, and thank you for.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Have a nice night, everyone.
Good night.